Hello, everybody, and welcome to the NEWSPASTE Podcast with me, Johnny Vedmore, and I'm here with someone who is brilliant, Dan Fournier. And I hope I'm pronouncing that last name correctly.
Yes,
Fournier.
correct.
Oh, good. There was
Perfect.
a Dr. Fournier who saved my life, once upon a time in Bristol.
My father was a doctor.
Well, did your father have any sort of like did sex change operation? No. In that case, then it was definitely not the same person. But no,
Okay.
indeed, I had Graves' disease, and it had been undiagnosed, and for 13 years, loads of symptoms, and it was a Dr. Fournier who was like diagnosed me in like a couple of minutes. I was always a big fan of the name Fournier, but this man does some writing. I mean, people know that I like to write, so I'll write articles. I try and keep them within about 7,500, 10,000 words. Dan could go further than that, can't you, Dan? You like to go a little bit further than that at times. But everything you read will pique your interest, and you'll find loads within his work that makes you go, oh, so that's it. Oh, so that's what's going on. Of course. And a lot of it is like, documentation from the past that shows the agenda and how they mapped out and how they planned it out. I mean, I have to say that one of the moments when I was first setting up NewsPaste, and I was putting people's work up to kind of showcase different people's stuff and promote it. It was that picture of Werner von Braun, I think it is, on the moon. And when I first saw it, I thought to myself, God, that's a really good picture, isn't it? They've really photoshopped that well. That's what my thought was straight away. And just discovering it's a real picture, then you go, okay, there's oh God, that sends shivers down your spine. And you are a man, Dan, of there's conspiracy all around you. There's conspiracy. You investigate conspiracy, really. You investigate what they call conspiracy, and it's a fascinating. You do such a good job. I'm really excited about this conversation, about having you on, because I love what you're doing, and it is extensive, and it is just up my street. I know that the people who listen to this podcast and the people who support my work will go crazy for your stuff, because what you're doing is the same thing I'm doing, which is finding information and putting it in order, usually chronological or event, and how the events went chronologically, and then it makes sense. The whole thing makes sense, and knowing everything is the key. So where can I know you've got Fournier .substack.com, but where else have you been plying your trade before, Dan?
Yeah, there's first of all, thanks you, Johnny, for having me on. I've been following your work for not that long, but actually I just discovered you several months ago, but I'm really impressed by your work as well. So thank you very much for having me on. Yes, people can find out where I write, primarily from my Substack. So fournier.substack.com. You can do /about, and then there's a list of other publications. Just to mention a few, there's activist posts in the US and up here in Canada. There's global research. .ca. So that's a site that's been publishing, stellar articles for years. So I have several posted on there. So I'm really honored to be on that platform as well. And of course, NewsPaste. You're nice enough to allow me to submit some articles and post them there. So that's basically where people can find my work. So.
For people who can see the video right now, I'm rubbing a glass over my head because it's full of ice and it's boiling hot. How hot is it in Canada at the moment?
It's weird because we had a really kind of cool summer, pretty crappy, and a lot of it was due to geoengineering, which is...
I've been saying this in the park, and people, of course, been looking at me like I'm a loony.
I'm actually working on, I have a whole month of September just to work on this particular post. So it's probably going to be my longest, might be 100 pages. I don't know. I did a kind of post for a calling for gathering intelligence on it, and I've heard from some Canadians because I really want to get this right. I've been following this for almost a decade now. They've been spraying the crap out of us here, at least where I live in Quebec, in my neck of the woods here, since I've returned from China, because I returned from China in late 2021. And they used to spray in China a lot too, where I lived in different cities there. So to be honest, I'm pretty sick of it. So I'm gonna expose the crap out of it. And like, I've been lied to. I've been really patient. Last year, I've been contacting, Environment, Climate Change Canada, Transport Canada, and I've just been getting lies and lies and lies. So I'm going to give them another chance this time. I'm going to, make media inquiries as a journalist, and they're going to get their chance. And whatever they reply, it's going to be on my post. If they want to show their colors, if they want to keep lying, well, they're going to expose themselves. I mean.
It's hard. It's hard not to think that they. I mean, I would assume that a load of them know that that's coming eventually. There's got to be. If you're clever and you build your career on the back of a lie, then at some point you work out that that's happened, and you have to accept that that's what you're doing. And I'm sure there's a load of them who know that it's coming, and there's a load of others who are just egged on by everybody else and like to think they know. But keep within their realm. I was watching a news report yesterday on wind turbines in the UK, and the guy who they had, the climate change guy, expert they had on, was crazy haired. He was looking mad. It looked like they had dragged in anyone they could get off the street to say the nonsense into the camera, and then they were going to cart him off again. And he looked as mad as a very famous horse commentator in the UK. I can't remember his name now. He looked as mad as him. And it makes me think that, they have to choose the maddest people to push these agendas, because it's clear. I know I did my own research for the Porting Down articles. They've been spraying for years and years and years. We all know it's happening. Really glad to see and hear that you're going down that route, because eventually I think that's the biggest lie that we've been sowed or given is the climate change narrative is one of the biggest lies that has almost been able to make us capitulate. So I'll be really looking forward. Wait, so you said China. Let's go back to the beginning. Where did you get brought up, Dan?
Okay, so just to give a very, very kind of a short summary of, I was kind of born and raised. I'm your typical Canadian. I was born and raised here in Quebec. Quebec, we have both, French culture, English culture. So just had a great childhood. I was born I'm pretty old. I'm born in 1967. So I graduated high school in 1984.
Heavy years, from research. 1967 were heavy years. I mean,
and ironically, in 1984, which is when I graduated, but it was like the mid 80s in Canada and many places, US, UK. It was just a fantastic time. The music was just absolutely incredible. I mean, of course, there's great music in the 70s too. We were just free as a bird when we were young, and everything was like super great. But like I spent 13. So basically, before maybe I talk about China. So I studied computers later on. Then I worked in computers for about 10 years or so, and then I became a teacher. So I taught computers at the beginning, and then I did a bachelor's in business at the same time, part-time. So then I taught business for a while, almost 10 years in the college, and then it was about 2008. I was kind of getting bored a little bit, wanted to change, so I went to China, and I was only going to go maybe for a few years, but I ended up 13 years there until late 2021. I came back a few times, of course, to Canada to visit. But when I came back in 2021, late 2021, I just almost had like this reverse culture shock. I just didn't recognize my country anymore. And totally flipped, turned, upside down, inside out. All this COVID madness, just what was going on with how the news was being manipulated and how, the people were being sheeple following, all these absurd, like draconian mandates, and they were particularly strict in Quebec. It was one of the worst provinces. They had, you had to have a vaccine passport if you were to travel like by train or plane. And I just got back to Quebec just like literally a week or two before that was imposed. So I thought I would go back into teaching, and the opportunity didn't really present itself. So that's why I had a kind of a career shift. I used to blog in China, but I'm pretty good at researching and writing. So I wanted to, do something new and, start writing about
something. Yeah, wait. What you're doing is writing short books. You're writing the type of books that should be sold for education purposes, for like miniature books that you could put in. You remember when we were kids and you had like the comic racks that had some like really interesting short novels, or the little bit of a bigger comics. Maybe we should have like more information racks around the place for people like you, because full of information as well. Some crazy amount of information. You're like me. You love sources. You love showing people. A lot of people are very like, oh, it's me. Look, it's all me. I'm doing this. But it's not about that. It's about going to the sources and finding these things and then putting together the jigsaw for other people to see. So you're just like a conduit for the truth to be put onto a canvas and all. And you do.
Maybe what differentiates me from other people too, because you got these great people. I'm sure you heard of James Corbett. He's also Canadian, and he's been in Japan for a long time.
King Corbett, yeah.
But like what I can offer people is, I'll do all the research, I'll put all the links, I'll put all the proof there, but I'm not afraid to add a little bit, to go deeper and to add some speculation. Okay, maybe that's a conspiracy theorist side. I don't care, like even my post, that was my second actual article, and it was about 50 pages. It was why society needs conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists, and it was republished in Global Research.
That's
because I submitted it, and I was really surprised because their director, Professor Chosudovsky, he's professor emeritus from University of Ottawa in economics. He's written so many books. The man is brilliant, and he said about my article, I can't remember the exact words, but it was something like brilliant article, great analysis, or something like that. And so I was like, okay, cool. So that was my second article.
That had the great psych document in it, the one that conspiracy theorist document in it. That was just like astounding to sit down, because I hadn't read that document before. I know I
CIA one.
Yeah. I think it was from some sort of like library archive that I'd never heard of before as well. That was like got loads of documents, like just loads and loads of documents there. But it was I'd never seen it. Like I'd never seen it written down properly before by them. It changes the game, changes your own mind. It changes your psychology. It nudges you to see something a different way. And it really like, I mean, those things are like, when I remember seeing that and going, whoa. This is why my life is the way it is. That document is like on the root of why I have like loads of trouble being able to make a living, why they censor people like you and I, why they hide everything we say. Like it's on that road, and it's so massively important to document these things, because even for someone like me who goes through all of the conspiracies, that is another mind-blowing moment. That is another red pill, or black pill, maybe even, because I mean, it makes you realize that your whole life has been a lie, made up and created. And that document was from like 1967, so that's the year you're born. They're already stamping where you're going to be in the future. We're going to label this baby already. Pop out, boom, label him conspiracy theorist. Next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a document, and what most people don't know, it's a dispatch, right? So it was a CIA dispatch for psychological operations, but most people only see that one page. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think I linked to the document where there's actually something like 20 pages that explains it a lot more in detail. So basically is to kind of disqualify anybody who was skeptical of the Warren Commission findings about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. We can talk about JFK later a little bit if you want. So that
are you
one
flirting with me, sir? It's, in the conspiracy world, talking about JFK is just going straight to the bedroom.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to bore your audience for hours on that, but
yeah.
I mean, there's a lot in that particular article, on my article, but maybe just a few things to retain is number one is, there's the CIA and all that, but it's more also how the CIA like infiltrated the media, especially with the Council on Foreign Relations. Because I have this huge infographic, and you can click on it and get the really, really big, like 6,000 pixels by 5,000 pixels one, where you see, all the news outlets, CNN, MSNBC, et cetera, all the people they have, in their control. I have a link to the former, one of the biggest newspapers in Germany, Udo Ulfgotti, I think his name is.
Yeah, Udo Ulfgotti. He came up in my German Marshall Fund article, Guido Goldman and the German Marshall Fund.
Yeah, the video's there. I mean, I have a couple links. He's just sick and tired of the CIA being, like, telling him what to write and all that, and how they infiltrated, even the European, because we know, like, just look what's going on with Germany now. They're obviously a puppet of the US.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but that was it. Like, I think like the German Marshall Fund story that I was writing, it made me understand that it was like, that was like Willy Brandt was this outsider from what German society had been, German politics had been. And when he took power, it was like I feel like he was probably, if you were to research his background, he was picked up by intelligence. He was a created leader. He was put there to finally give power of the German future and the German battle against the East to America through Harvard and through the German Marshall Fund. And then from there on, that was basically the CIA being given permission to go into Eastern Europe and work for not for Germany. Germany was paying for their services, and Germany had capitulated to American British dominance. Like, that's what I feel. It was those moments. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there was we could even talk about the OSS and how that was a precursor to the CIA, and I mean, that's another whole can of worms there you could talk about forever. But just a couple other things in my article, because I go over a few of the conspiracies. The actual conspiracies there are still kind of unresolved, so to speak. Of course, there's 9/11. There's so many holes there. There's no plane that ever hit, the Pentagon and that supposed field in Pennsylvania, and there's so many other holes in there, and it's, these things never been resolved. But the other one, the even bigger one, I think you talk about, we've been lied to, is the moon landing. I mean, that's one really detailed section in that post. I mean, if you read that and you cannot come to the conclusion that the Americans did not land on the moon, it was staged in a hangar, in a military hangar. There's proof, there's evidence. I linked to it, and there's. I have a bridge to sell you if you think we went on the moon. I'm sorry. I mean, do your own research, but it's clear as day. I mean, I provide so much evidence, and most of that evidence came from a 3-hour video documentary on the subject. That for example, they hired expert photographers. From the time, like these top fashion photographers in the world and everything, and have them examine the lighting and the pictures, the supposed pictures on the moon. And, there's like shadows coming from different light sources, which should be impossible on the moon and so on. So anyway, I don't want to get all like moon landing conspiracy and flat earth or anything like that. But
I know, I think I think you're completely right. Because I mean, when I think I was 19 when I realized myself that there was one massive hole, is that I had this. I had got this mobile phone, my first mobile phone. It was 1999. You know, having a mobile phone, your first one.
Wow.
It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't a smartphone or everything because these weren't in existence, but it was pretty cool. And it looked pretty fancy, and barely anyone had a phone and all of this in my friendship group, so I was pretty trendy. And then I learned that they claimed that the technology that sent into the moon that was on the actual spacecraft was the same as that was on that phone, and I went, no, I'm just not doing this. I'm just not doing it anymore. I believed before, and now you've just lost me. You just lost me very quickly because that doesn't make any sense. And they've tried in movies to bash out that theory. Like in Apollo 13, they were doing it, and they're like, "Oh, how can we take away stuff, so that we can gain more power and stuff like this." It's just bull. I mean, it's just. How do you think people have left the planet? Do you think Yuri Gagarin went round and orbited in the shuttle like that around the Earth?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, like the first man in space supposedly is Yuri Gagarin, right, from the Soviet Union back then. I mean, did he go? Like, who knows? Like, maybe, probably. I don't know. It's hard
I
to
always
say.
felt it was like they just out of the atmosphere, and he was
Yeah,
like being propelled out, and he would have been in a little pod going, and
yeah,
without any control over what he's
yeah.
doing. So it's not like he was the man who was fired up there, and that spurred on America to say, okay, we need to make it look like we have, otherwise we are losing this whole Cold War narrative that's going to come next, because it was a change of how they were perceiving nuclear warfare and etc. as well, as you'll know. Yeah, really interesting. That's really so.
Yeah, no, it is like super interesting. But if people look into it, and even astronauts have said this, they talked about the Van Allen belt, that there being too much radiation for human beings to go through there. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but there's a lot of scientists that say that too, especially astronauts. So like if astronauts are saying that, and they lost all the telemetry data, for their moon landing, the most important event in human history, and they can't find the data, no backups, like
and
what?
they just
Kidding
didn't they
me?
destroy everything or something like that? They decided they
So
needed to destroy the technology.
I mean,
So,
there are more holes in the moon landing like thing than there are in a block of Swiss cheese. I mean, it doesn't add up. But anyway, we can talk about more like like
what
pertinent things.
lighter subjects? You don't get more light than space. Honestly, there's zero heavy in space. Anyway, yeah. So right. So, but this is the realm that we're in. Okay, for people who are not red pilled or black pilled listening into this conversation, they're going to hear two loonies going, "Yeah, no one went to space. Don't be silly." But when you look at the actual facts of what you would need to get into space, none of it makes sense. And when you hear what they're made, it's also the reactions from the astronauts themselves, how threatening they've been and how angry they've been on occasion about being questioned. You think if that was the biggest thing of your life and someone questioned it, you'd say, okay, I'm not surprised you question it, because it's hard to believe that it actually happened. That always made me doubt things. So,
Yeah,
like, okay. So go on.
oh, you want to finish your thought?
No.
Okay.
I want to hand
Yeah,
over
I
to
was
you.
gonna say, like, just talking about these things too, because I do talk about 911 in that post, September 11 attacks. But in my current series, I think we might talk about a little bit is what I think is coming next is a giant cyber attack. But actually, that was part two of a series, and the part one dealt with they were talking about Werner von Braun earlier, just before we hit record, I think, or it might have been after, I'm not sure. So like he apparently gave some warning that they're going to try to pull off this, so-called alien hoax thing. So
Mm-hmm.
part one of my series, which is probably 45 pages too, I talk a lot about, there's a whole section on 9/11 too. And let me just pull up a little bit here information. So
Yeah, because
yeah, so yeah, sorry, I lost my thought there. But this about the September 11th attacks, there is conjecture that no planes actually hit the Pentagon, that these were holograms and projected holograms, and that there were explosions. The explosions were legitimate because they were planted devices, right? But that no planes actually went in. And then people say, well, that's crazy. How can like thousands of people see projected, or could see supposed hologram in the sky, or it's not real? Like, so people might argue that. But then in that post, I actually, if people go, it's called the Alien Deception Distraction Part 1 on my Substack. And I also I added this, I don't know if it was an addendum, but I added that the technology existed by the US military even 2 years in the late 1990s to project these kinds of holograms. So my article is so long, I'm trying to scroll through there, but it's somewhere in there.
Well, a lot of
the technology existed for that. So, but anyway, the premise of this particular article too is, I don't think that there's going to be this kind of hoax, despite, Werner von Braun's kind of warning. I think this is all, and they already tested the waters because they had this, these so-called like witnesses that they had testify recently before Congress, right, about the aliens, and we recovered biologics and so
why
on.
I felt that was a step going towards this. That was one of the steps going towards them trying this out. Yeah, you're right. It is like putting their toes in the water. Yeah.
And to me, this is all a distraction. Okay, could they do it? Maybe they'd have the means to do it. It's possible. But I think it's a distraction to what they're really planning, and we can talk about this a little bit. And this is probably my longest single article, even though it's part 2. It's the cyber attack crisis. So if you want, we can talk about that and why I think that's what's coming next.
Yeah, well, it's because it's the most realistic next step. I mean, were they just before COVID? Some big, I think it was an ex-army general or something, said, "Oh, we knew about aliens for ages and stuff," and we've had a load of little bits and bobs around where people have been saying aliens, 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 and then we had these hearings recently, and I get a feeling that it's just not sticking, and they know it's not sticking, and COVID didn't help with that. So the next step is the doable, and this is something. So how I mean, I saw the I studied Usenet, so the original internet, and we're on internet 2.0 really at the moment in that sense, because that was really the original, and so the next one is on its way. So how do you think we get from where we are now, and what do you think is going to happen in the future with this?
Yeah, I think we can call it different names. Maybe we can call it Internet 2.0 or whatever. It'll be the next generation. So basically the way I see it is that, and many other people see it too, is that how is it going to be different? Okay, well, one of the big aspects of it will be in a higher level of increased censorship. And, that's why they have this whole rules thing of, misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. And I was I'm sure maybe some of your guests know about SGT Report. I was on that show at the end of May. And I said, there's no such thing as misinformation, malinformation, and disinformation. It's all information, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we just need to discern it. So we have a pandemic of a lack of critical thinking and discernment. That's a problem. Okay, So, but how do they do that? Well, they're going to be doing that with AI, and they're going to be doing that through basically just checking everything that goes through all the piping of the internet. and through like IP addresses. We can talk about IP addresses. We talked a little bit about that before we hit record. There's some pretty astonishing things I can tell you about that. And so in my article too, well, maybe before I get to that part, so why I think there's going to be this Internet 2.0. Yeah, there's the censorship and issue, okay, that they need, because they need to shut us up, okay, people like you and me and a lot of us so-called troublemakers, right? So they have to shut us up because we're exposing everything they're doing, right? So that's number one. But the biggest thing they need is because another thing I talk about in the article in both parts is we're coming to the end of, you know, a global financial system and what they call the fourth turning, okay? So they need a major event like 9/11 or, you know, a major world war or something to bring about the change so the masses will accept, okay? So what do they need the masses to accept? They need the masses to accept digital ID, mark of the beast. Why do they want that so badly? Because without that, they cannot get their global CBDC. I wrote another post about Unicoin, which is kind of a global CBDC that they would be wanting. That's a huge post too, so it must be 45 pages or something. And I go through the, you know, the structure of the banking cabal, and I talked about that, the banking cabal, the BIS, and all that on SGT report too, because, you know, these organizations, they're all based in Switzerland. They all have immunity from prosecution, just like people at the United Nations and so on. So, like, I almost forgot my train of thought there, but that's a big part of it. So they want to implement the global CBDC, but they can't do that without a digital ID. And they know both of these things are extremely unpopular. So how do you get people to come on board? I don't see I don't think there's going to be another coronavirus pandemic. I think this is also just a distraction. They're testing the waters a little bit, but people are not going to buy into that. But, you know, things of technical nature like cyber attacks and all that, most people haven't the foggiest clue. I even studied in computers. You know, we're talking about the internet. I was programming web pages and, you know, monochrome web pages on mainframe computers before, like, we actually knew the, you know, World Wide Web with, like, you know, images. Even before images, I was programming on it, you know. So this is next generation. So what's coming up with these changes, they can't get these things unless they have some kind of like reason. So a cyber attack really fits the purpose. Why? Because, yeah, it's complicated. People are not going to understand it, and, you know, what's going to happen is they're going to, you know, just going to be desperate, because if they do this cyber attack, they'll probably cut the electrical grid for, I would guess, at least a week. Okay, you know, so, you know, people freak out. They can't, you know, 1 or 2 days without their internet, you know, or even electricity, people freak out, you know. So imagine 1 week, and then, you know, that's going to shut down everything. Global supply chains, people will not be able to go to ATMs. Store shelves are going to, you know, if people have cash, you know, they're going to get wiped out if they're open, the disruptions and all that. And section 5 of my post on the cyber attack, it focuses on what I would call a test run they had for this that happened in Canada last summer. Okay, I think it's July 8th, 2022. And ironically, that was the date that there was the World Economic Forum cyber polygon exercise simulation of a global cyber attack.
Did they run it in 2022 then? Did they run cyber polygon?
They ran it later in the year. The event was postponed. It was postponed like months earlier for a later date. But it was scheduled
that had to be
July
to do
8th.
with the Ukraine-Russia stuff. That had to be because when for the first two, I think it was the first two that they did was like it was Mikhail Mishustin was heading up all of the stuff, and he was all like, there was a load of Russians who were basically helping out with Cyberpolygon. I suppose the last Cyberpolygon had 0 Russians involved. Yeah.
Well, that's it. There was no Cyberpolygon 2023. They had
Yeah,
2020, 2021, 2022. And then, we know that, of course, Russia invaded the Ukraine. And the first 2 cyber polygons were organized by, SBER, Sberbank, or the big Russian bank. And Bizon, BI.zon are like kind of Russian cybersecurity firm.
Yeah, some weird sort of like,
It was all led by, those people. They even had, conferences. They were even connecting with the cosmonauts, astronauts at the International Space Station and everything. And they had different guests. So anyway, it's kind of an interesting coincidence, and it's very technical in nature how this like Rogers outage happened, because there were some like experts who just kind of found some fishy holes in it, and I write about that in my post. And I actually had to consult another Substacker who's kind of like more comfortable with this technical stuff, because I want to make sure I understood it well.
When you're saying Rogers outage, for people who don't know, Rogers is a company. Yeah, it's a telecommunication.
Sorry. Yeah, in Canada we have like Rogers Communication, because in Canada we only have 2-3 major providers of cell phone service. So it's similar to like AT&T, Verizon in the US. Okay, so in Canada we have Bell and we have Rogers, and I think the other one is Shaw. So a lot of them provide both cell service and internet services. Okay. So, but there were a lot of like fishy things that were going on in that outage, because they said they were doing some maintenance upgrade or things like that. But actually there's a lot of fishy stuff going on with the routing, because the packages, when we surf the internet, or when I send you an email or you send me an email or there's a Zoom call or whatever, these packets are flowing through the internet back and forth, right? But they go through plumbing, they go through pipes, right? They go through these major providers, right? And it's no secret, like the history of the internet is ARPANET, right? It's a military kind of communication network, right? So everything that goes through there is all filtered. It could be encrypted, sure, but I mean, it's pretty safe to assume that at least the U.S. military, they pretty much know everything that's going, through all these packets. So what's interesting? So anyway, like I think it was kind of a cast, because like they showed video, also they linked to Reuters articles about Canadians that were really upset about the outage, and it wasn't even 24 hours, and people were freaking out because they couldn't, check their Facebook. They couldn't take a taxi because they didn't have cash, and they only accepted cash that day, and the ATMs were not working, and it was just chaos, like in a way. And that was just one day, so imagine a week. I think this was a test run to see how people would react to. That's a little bit conjecture, sure. I don't have definite proof, but I have suspicions. But there's some weird stuff happening with like IP addresses too. And something we were talking about pre-record is like literally 3 minutes before Joe Biden took office, okay, there's the Department of Defense. They have this kind of like obscure division called the DDS, Defense Digital Service. Okay. And they actually owned collectively like 175 million IP addresses. Okay. And they transferred that to this obscure company called Global Resource Systems, which I believe is based in Florida. And this was 3 minutes before Biden took office. I don't know why exactly.
What are all of those? That's the creation of a load of like IP addresses that will be used for bots, used for AI.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but it's kind of like, let's say I don't know, you have your newspace.com, okay? You install that. There's a server, newspace.com. If you could go IP domain lookup or something, it'll give you a number like 13.12.155.2 or something like that, right? Those are IP addresses. So that only belongs to you, right? So any traffic flowing, it'll go there. But let's say they don't like you, okay, and that particular IP address, they can ban it, okay, and no traffic will go to or from there, okay. If they don't like you, that's a way to unplug you. They already do this with to prevent spam from flowing on the internet, okay.
Yeah.
Now, what exactly are these 175 million IP addresses? I'm not exactly sure, but because it's basically the Department of Defense and ARPA that created the internet, they have somehow had all these addresses. Why are they transferring them to this obscure company? They have a website, but there's nothing on there. I'm not exactly sure, but I have a feeling maybe I only read about this morning, so I haven't had chance to dig in deeper, but I have a feeling that maybe this has to do with Internet 2.0. Look at the changes happening on X, formerly called Twitter. I think that a lot of the new internet is going to be filtered through these IP addresses, but I could be wrong because this is very technical, and and maybe a lot of techies will point out some holes
nuances.
in my thing. But like I said, I haven't done the full deep dive yet. I need to consult with some other people on this. A little bit
It sounds
speculation
like
for
it,
now.
but I mean, what does is it puts 180 million players on the battlefield. That's a digital battlefield. It's something along those lines, yeah.
And just to give you an idea of the numbers, 175 million IP addresses is the equivalent of what we have in China, or China Telecom is the biggest provider of internet sites and internet in China, right? So it's bigger than that and AT&T combined, okay? So that gives you an idea. We're not talking about a small little corner of the internet. We're talking about a pretty large percentage. I don't know, that amounts to what, if it's 6 or 16%. I don't know the exact number, but it's a pretty big chunk,
It's turning now we're going into total fifth generation warfare. This is coming.
Yeah, this is where the AI ties in, because I think there's too much traffic to monitor and everything. So they're going to be using AI, and that's why X platform just changed its terms of service. Even Zoom also, I think last year they got some pushback because they changed their terms of service, and they said that they're going to permit some AI kind of testing kind of thing, and then people got angry, and I think they removed it afterwards from their terms of service. It might still be in there, I don't know. But X also, they just recently made some of these changes too, and then they want to collect people's. They can collect your biometric information, okay, your face, tag your pictures, things like that. Facebook already does this. This is usually done kind of without your consent, unless you go change some certain settings. But they're obviously doing it. They've done it in China. China, it's everywhere because I live there. I know there's cameras everywhere. They do it. So they're doing these things, and it's going to be a pretty tyrannical control grid if you start having things like AI dictate, what traffic can flow, who can post what. What can be considered hate speech, this, that, or the other. I mean, even in China, even 5 years ago, they had court cases in Shenzhen where I was. It wasn't judges ruling cases; it was AI programs. Okay, so you can imagine how tyrannical this could get. You would have no recourse. So anyway, maybe because. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, it's so complicated with AI. There's what we got now. I've been playing around with Chat GPT now. It's really good for some things. It's really good for letter writing. It's really good for doing certain tasks. But you can see how programmed it is. It claims not to be if you ask it, but if you go through a backwards and forwards and you test it out, you watch how it's been programmed. And it tells you as well. It tells you it's not allowed to talk about this. It's not allowed to talk about that. It's these type of things are considered could be harmful to people or could make people upset. But then there's this there's sometimes where it's just it takes a while to learn it. So the other day I was able to create a play with Jimmy Savile in it, and it was completely inappropriate. And then a couple of chats down the line, it wouldn't let me insert him into anything else. And he was like, no, he did bad things. It's like, well,
Oh
it
yeah.
took you a while. It told me that it never did what it did. And I then showed it what it did, and it said, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that. So uh, it's programmed to make you feel as though it's something that's fallible, that's something that oh yeah, maybe you're right, you can help me, I can help you, so give me more information, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's been programmed to be genteel, to coax the information out of people, and I find it like I find myself trying to test boundaries with it, because we're all hitting there. Once things are run by AI in a way that's organized, I have no idea what this society is going to look like anymore. And I think we're about 5 years away from that happening.
Yeah,
So
I think,
this,
yeah, there's
the,
different phases in that. Yeah, because like you just look at especially younger generation. I don't want to be critical of younger generation, but it's just they were, like brought up with, computers from very, very young age, unlike us, like where it came a little bit when we were early teens or whatever. But nowadays, a new generation, like there's a lack of, critical thinking. And so if you ask somebody a complicated question, their reaction is, I'll Google it, right? Okay, so and we all know Google, like they have their algorithms, they have a lot of, there's a really, really good research organization with the Jeffrey Epstein from out in the West in the US, and he wrote a whole book. And you can go on the Epoch Times. He has a great interview with is it Jan Jakalik, or I forget his name, about the bias, especially during the elections with the Google and all that, and how they manipulate people. And you might get different search results, and I will get, and there's a lot of social programming. So the next phase of that would be, well, that's why they're coming out with all this Chat GPT and all those like programs, is that for complex questions, people are going to go and they're ask these AI programs, but you have to look at who's behind them, because a lot of them, they're pretty shady organizations behind them, and that there's a lot of bias built in. Okay, especially if you do some research about, because I only tried once with one of these AI chat programs, and I was asking about the research of like some really good like researchers like Dr. Harvey Reich, for COVID and all that. And I was asking about, oh, well, what about his research papers? And they were there. You could tell that they were saying, oh, well, he's biased, or almost like a conspiracy theorist. And like, what the hell are you
I had
talking
an
about?
argument
Like,
about
this is like
conspiracy
the
theorists
number
with
one like
ChatGPT.
published guy in his particular field in the US, and they have all these labels, and you shouldn't trust him, and like what the heck? And also you're talking about ChatGPT. Who's behind ChatGPT? If I'm not mistaken, is this guy named Sam Altman, okay? And he's the guy behind WorldCoin. If you've seen this globe thing, they've been going around the world. You can get your face scanned, and you can get some free WorldCoin crypto. And this is what we're talking about, digital ID market beast. Because once you give that over, at least voluntarily, that's the market beast. And that's if they make any kind of digital ID using that particular biometric data on you, you're screwed. Okay, because in the future, if you get into these systems, not only will you not be able to use their CBDC or their digital payments or cash, you will not even be able to travel internationally. I remember just a few years ago, through Hong Kong airport, they had the face scan thing and all that. And a friend told me about this, and he didn't want to get that done, And he said, well, you can opt out of it, but not many people know that you can opt out of it. You have to go and tell them, I don't want to do this face scan thing. I just want to do it regular way. So, all these controls are coming in, and it's happening a lot in the US now, where where they're encouraging this, and they always sell it. It's going to be so much more convenient, right? They always sell. People are just being sucked into all these digital kind of like traps and prisons, and they don't realize that it's very, very hard to escape once they flip the switch. If they get the national digital IDs with CBDCs, people are going to have a really rough time trying to escape from there. So I would encourage people to use cash as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Try not to get, things automatically debited from your accounts. If you have to pay your bills online, do it monthly. Don't do automatic payments and all these kinds of things. Try to get out of those systems if you can, because the more you get into these systems, the more difficult it's going to be to get out, and the less alternatives you're going to have, whether it's Bitcoin or other systems of trade and barter. So anyway,
I'm worried about that. No, you're not. You're saying a load of stuff that a load of people who are listening will find completely and utterly important. Which is, I'm trying not to be negative about the future of cash, but it's pretty clear that I'm not in control of making cash. So the Royal Mint down the road from me, I think it's is it Land Nation? I think it's in Land Nation, makes currency for 80 countries in the world. I think it is only coins. I don't think they handle the notes. But basically, like all of this sort of stuff can be centralized in different places because it's money, and it's just a central bank that can stop it all of a sudden. And I'm not optimistic about cash being an option in 10 years' time, and that there will be the divide within society. There has to be a divide within society, the people who live outside the cities and the people who live inside the cities. And transhumanism and technocracy both envision massive mega cities out in the middle with loads of people living in there, and outside hardly any people, scattered communities that have usually been then obliterated through war that is possibly between megacities, because they will themselves then become like the old nation states of the past, I suppose, city states, of the past. It's interesting how the evolution of nation states has happened over the years. Now it's kind of going backwards. People don't really realize it, but mega cities of 20 plus million is what people like Elon Musk want to create, want to see happen. And there'll be rivalries between them, different laws in different places, yet they will be in the same landmass that currently are a country. So that's all disintegrating away. There's so much being lost. How can we keep cash? I mean, is there any ways that you can think of that we could keep cash? We'd have to create our own, surely, and then there would be serious trust issues.
Yeah, you have to push back. I mean, just a few months ago, the Bank of Canada, our central bank, they did a survey to the general public about, use of cash and potential for CBDC and this, that, and the other. Okay. They say, oh, don't worry, cash will always be there. But yeah, don't worry. You can't really trust these kinds of people and institutions, right? Especially if you see who's behind the central banks. You have to go up the food chain. And several of my posts in my current series in the part 1, I display this pyramid, which is, if you've heard of a guy named Ronald Bernard, he used to be a very high level banker, and at the very top, he says that, there are probably about 8,500 people, like the very, very high level bankers controlling everything. Now, some people might argue it's the committee of 300 or a very, very high level, rich families and all that controlling everything. Then you have the BIS, the IMF, and then you have the central banks, and then you have, corporations, and then you have governments, and then you have the sheeple people, right?
Yeah.
So it's the pyramidal structure. It's all about control. Now, I think if we're looking at these kinds of things, we're looking at digital ID, market beast, we're talking about essentially control. They want total control on humanity. You talked about transhumanism. The bigger I mean, transhumanism is only part of what we would call depopulation. I did my longest series is I did a COVID-19 Holocaust comparison series, which is
Yeah.
based. It's a
Did you make the
7 part
picture
series.
yourself in the I think it was in part 5 where you had the barbed wire down the middle, and you had the different people from the Nazi era and then the modern era. Did you do that graphic yourself? That was amazing.
No, I believe not. But there were different parts. There's six main parts.
Yeah.
Parts there.
I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, no, but there was part, because this is based on the a series called Never Again Is Now Global, which was produced by Vera Sharoff, who's a first generation survivor, and it was promoted by Children Health Defense too, the video and all that. So what I did is that, because it's a really interesting series, but what kind of bothered me a little bit as a journalist too is there were lots of elements of propaganda in it that I didn't like, okay? Because there's the eerie music, they kind of show only one side, or seem to show one-sided things. So I said, okay, like, I like to cut through the bullshit, and whoever's like putting it out. So I said, I went out on a mission. I want to look at each episode, because there's 5 episodes. So I have 5 main parts, plus I have a conclusion at the end. So I went through about 2 or 3 of the main claims they had in each episode, okay? So I state them in each of my parts, and then they said during the video, maybe they listed a whole bunch of articles about, I don't know, like some COVID things, articles about ivermectin or this or that or the other. And then I try to examine objectively those claims. Do they have merit? Do they not have merit? I think I examined in the conclusion, I forget the exact number of claims, it was 10 or 12, and there's only one that actually I think that they had merit, totally had merit. But all the others did. So people can just look at the conclusion, the part 6, I do a conclusion where I give an overview because it's shorter, because the whole thing I put into an ebook, which is 100 my longest post. So, but the part 3, the reason I'm saying this, I'm just setting up for part 3. Part 3 was exclusively on eugenics. It was the longest part. It was 45 pages just for that part. And it was on eugenics. So I explored the eugenics movement in, early America in the 20th century, and a lot of it came from England too. People like Darwin, not only was he a Freemason, but he was a eugenicist. And so I can come to no other conclusion that the COVID-19 thing, the woke agenda, and a lot of the open borders, a lot of this are depopulation programs. So they're continuing depopulation in the 21st century. They just use different names. Back then they used to call them the feeble-minded. We don't want them to reproduce, or inferior races. Now they can't say these kinds of things. So they're going to go and they're going to, use this woke agenda. And they'll put these twisted labels like gender affirming care, or reproductive rights. Okay, that means abortion. Okay, gender affirming care.
I heard someone in
mutilation. Yeah. Okay,
I hear we hear conversations now on TV, and we hear it happening, and it's people are so emboldened by the like brainwashing, like people within society. I was listening to someone today in a cafe talking about being pro-abortion in a way that was just like, it was hard for me to understand whether she liked life. When I heard her words, if she liked life of any type. She just seemed to be in a spiral that she wanted to get out of herself, and I'm not surprised that those marry up really well, because I think a lot of it is what I'm trying to put a point on here is a lot of it is they're torturing us. Like you say, they torture us, they mutilate us, they psychologically disturb us, they brainwash us, they hypnotize us, they make us do what they want, they inject us full of stuff, and we're broken at the end, and then they give you the option eventually Do you feel like you want to be here? Because you've got all of these illnesses that seem to come from nowhere, but might be the cadmium oxide sulfide or whatever they were spraying over, cadmium zinc sulfide that they were spraying over Britain for years and years. Or maybe it's because of all of the other different attacks we have from all over the place that they are doing. I mean, when you're talking about, if we're talking about spraying stuff, I mean, they were through the 50s and 60s in Britain, they were spraying out the back of trains, planes, cars. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point there was a guy going down the motorway on horseback spraying chemicals over the population. And when you saw the maps of where they were spraying and how they were spraying everywhere. And that was back then. Everything got hidden now. So yeah, we're seeing an agenda coming. I mean, this is why this sort of work is so massively important, because there are lots of comparisons to be made about the time we live in now and the Holocaust. Yeah, if you say that to the people who are on the other side of this agenda, a lot of them believe differently.
I mean, just the word Holocaust too, like who can say that? Holocaust denier, and all these kinds of, like, just like climate denier, right? They use these labels, right, to shut people up, okay? Or they call them an anti-Semite. They don't even know what that means, Semite, right? What's a Semite? They don't even know that. But behind all this, you're talking about agendas, okay? So you have to look at the bigger picture and how nefarious a lot of these things are, because depopulation, you're talking about the spraying, or we're talking about, I think before we hit record, lots of spraying going on here. That's going to be my next big article I'm working on for the whole month about geoengineering. It's going to be geoengineering in Canada, but it's going to touch upon a lot what's going on in the US, because a lot of what they're spraying are poisonous chemicals, and now they're putting a lot more pretty nefarious stuff in there too. But you have to kind of look at the bigger picture and what's the mindset behind these people, and who are these people, and why are they doing what they're doing. It's all about control. Okay. They want to do depopulation. They want to get rid of us useless eaters, as Harari, WF puppet, would say. But you have to look at who's atop this pyramid. Who are the people who are, carrying out these agendas? Who are their foot soldiers, and who are the people behind the shadows that we never hear about and nobody ever points the finger to? That's the very, very top of the pyramid, okay? So just to give you a little bit of and these are all Satanists at the very core, okay? Because if you look at this agenda of control, and people always think it's conspiracy theory, New World Order. I mean, there's plenty that has been written, even for more than 100 years. You can look up the word and the phrase New World Order. Okay, this is nothing new. It's been around since at least the 1850s.
I call it the prevailing world order, because it's whatever's going at that time, and it just keeps prevailing.
And to be honest, that's America. That's what America was established for, okay, specifically for, okay? And I can show you some proof later. But just to tie in, an example how I like to tie things in, connect dots, so to speak, like David Icke dot connector kind of thing is, okay, we're talking about cyber polygon. So if you look at the cyber polygon, I can't remember if it was 2022 or 2021. I think it was 2021. Cyber polygon exercise. There were two main. There were several main guests, but one of the main guests was Steve Wozniak. Okay, famous founder from Apple, and we could talk about Apple another day if you want. But that's just like X or Elon Musk, these are CIA intelligence creations, okay? You guys know about In-Q-Tel, okay? In-Q-Tel is a division of the CIA or Department of Defense. I can't remember which of the two. I think it's Department of Defense, if I'm not mistaken. But basically, they're arms of these agencies, and they create these particular tech companies, many are related to the military, to come out with different things. I didn't do a deep dive into Facebook, but that's certainly a possibility. That was one of their creations as well. I did a post about Elon Musk also not too long ago, and it's just so obvious with his X app, because his X app is basically like the WeChat app in China.
Yeah.
Okay, WeChat is developed.
It was what was planned in Russia as well. Is what was planned by Sberbank.
Yeah, exactly. And WeChat. I lived 13 years in WeChat. You do everything with WeChat. You pay for everything. Mm-hmm. During COVID, you had it on your phone. You had the QR code to get in and out of places, and it's really about control. And the last 2 years I was teaching there, I was teaching mostly at Tencent, that company. Okay. And I taught very, very high level people in Tencent in different departments. They have a big data department, they have AI, they have like a whole bunch of, so I knew what they were working on. And so if you think this, like the WeChat scary, it's very convenient, very, very convenient, but it's, basically the government knows everything about your life through the application, and they have the open door through it, through the company, even though the company says they will not, divulge private information, but they do have to by law, right? Course, yeah. And people might not notice, but any foreign company that does business in the US, they have to give access to their servers. So there's no privacy for their employees or for their operations. That's why they steal all the IP and everything. But to come back to the control thing and New World Order, to come back to the cyber polygon, I think it's 2021 with Steve Wozniak. He was interviewed, I think it was a 30-minute session. I didn't put it in my post, but I almost felt like adding an addendum. Maybe I will in the next few days. Most people don't know, but Steve Wozniak, I was talking about Apple and how it was a creation probably of this. Yeah, it's a very satanic organization. If you look, we can talk about the symbology, but Steve Wozniak is a very high level, I think he's 33rd degree Freemason. Did you know that?
No, I did know.
Oh, he is. Because there's this Vancouver Freemasonry website in the Western Canada in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. It lists also. And if you go to woz.com, he has his own website. If you go to the archive, the earlier versions, he says he's a Freemason. He just says he's a non-practicing Freemason. Like, really? Non-practicing. Yeah, you took an oath, and the oath they take, the oath of secrecy, and if they reveal the secrets, they're gonna they're gonna be sliced up and so on. I don't want to get into the gory details.
I might want to get into the gory details.
And just a few, just to give you a little bit, here we can get into the fun, esoteric kind of stuff. I did and you have to check out, in Quebec, there's a couple other guys that do this podcast called the Big Puff Podcast. So I was on their show a few months ago, and I'm going to be on their show at the beginning of October. And we were talking about a lot of the symbology things because, let me just get this post up here, and I want to show you something, because when I lived in China, have you heard of a chap named Confucius?
Yes.
Who was Confucius? Just if you can.
There you go.
I'll put you on the spot there.
Well, he was a guy who lived back in China years ago, and basically he was an advisor. He became an advisor to a load of different rulers, and I think he was like basically I don't know all of his teachings, but basically don't rock any boats ever. Basically, that's what.
Yeah, you're right. He was a government advisor. Okay.
Yeah.
He lived during the Zhou dynasty. This is over 2,000 years ago, right?
It's hard, man. I do read a lot. Do take in a lot, wow. And but trying to remember details about such things.
Okay. But he's more famous for being a Chinese philosopher. Mm-hmm. Okay, Confucius Institute. Confucius Institute. If you know Confucius Institute, it's a front for CCP. But anyway, he had this expression, and I'll read this quote from him, and he is so right. And think about it, this is almost 2,500 years ago. He said, "Signs and symbols rule the world, not words nor laws."
Yeah, he did say a lot of very clever things. I did miss that out. He is a very clever fella. Yeah. And I mean,
oh yeah.
The Chinese history is full of those clever fellas who we should be listening to now. That we should be looking.
Yeah, Chinese history is fascinating. I probably know more about Chinese history than my own Canadian history. Because Chinese history is just so fascinating. I have my bookshelf back there. There's 3 red volume. I didn't read through the whole thing. It's called the Hung Society. It's basically the Freemasons in China.
Oh, wow. Wow, that makes sense.
I got a Hong Kong. I used to get great books in Hong Kong, all the time. They used to have an antiquarian book fair. I could find some jewels there. Anyway, to come back to the what he said, signs rule the world, not words nor laws. Just look at the logos of NASA, anything. Look at the Apple logo. Most people see it every day. They don't notice symbols. What's the Apple logo?
It's the apple, maybe. It's
the apple with
the bite mark. Yeah, the
what
temptation.
Does the bite represent?
Yeah, the temptation, the Garden of Eden, the descent of mankind, the fall. I know the devil whispering in your ear.
That's right. So it has meaning. It has significance, right? It's just like you said, the Bible, Genesis, right? When Eve took a bite in the apple of the forbidden fruit from the Garden of Eden, right? After being tempted by the snake. Who's the snake? The snake is Satan, right? Okay. Despite their warning to God, okay, she disobeyed. Okay. So what does it represent? Okay, it represents how humans choose to disobey God and go their own way. So do what thou wilt, or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
it is all of the law.
Like Jay-Z, another high-level Freemason says all the time, Jay-Z, right? So moreover, it represents sin, okay, with all the pain and suffering that happens as a result. Okay, so it represents sinful ways. Okay, so in a sense, it's like it's the result, of Eve and her husband Adam, who ate from the fruit and did this act of disobedience from God, God's command. So death happened. It's not like a physical death, but it's like a spiritual death. Okay, so the sinful life, it results in the damnation to hell. Okay. As opposed to an eternal existence in heaven, right? After physical death, the soul lives on. So by choosing this sinful way of life, one is sacrificing one's soul, okay, which is what the ruling elite who worship Lucifer, Satan himself, that's what they desire. Okay. Even worse, if you look at the original Apple logo, 2 other things. If you look at the original Apple logo, not only it has the apple with the bite taking, but there's more symbology, and this time with the colors. Do you remember they had the rainbow colors?
Yeah.
Okay, but there's a problem. There's only have 6 colors of the rainbow, not 7. Okay, so we can talk about numerology, because numbers 6 and 7 in numerology are quite significant.
Yeah.
Okay, and keep in mind, okay, just to do a little parallel.
Man is 5, the devil is 6.
And no, not necessarily that, but like also the same thing with the pride flag. If you look at the pride flag, it's the exact same colors as the Apple original logo. They only have 6 colors. They don't have 7. If you remember Newton's famous experiment, right? With the prism and the colors, okay, those had 7 colors, okay? So why is 6 significant, okay, and 7? Okay, so we can look at that a little bit. So, and we're talking about the New World Order and all that, and those at the very top of the pyramid. Okay, we're talking about Freemasons. Most of the Freemasons, 99.9% of them or whatever, they don't know about who's really at the top. And those who are really,
they're just happy to be in the gang. They're just happy to be in the gang.
They're just useful idiots, and they don't know it. Okay, even those 33 degrees, they're useful idiots. They don't even know who's at the top. They're just following orders. Okay. There's a great book, Jonathan Black, Mark Booth. I have the book behind me, and what's it called? The Hidden History. I forget. The Secret History of the World, something like that. Okay, I forget the exact title. Okay, and you can learn a lot in there. And it's basically these, he talks a lot about the mystery schools. Okay, these are the original fraternities, okay, secret societies. These are the very, very like original ones. Okay, so most of them originated in Egypt. Okay, some of them in ancient Greece and ancient Rome too. So in Egyptian mysticism, the number 6 infers to 2 possible routes one can take. Okay, it's like that famous fork in a road, right? Whereby an undecided person needs to choose, one path to go along, one path or the other. So it represents a choice to be made. Number 6, it represents, we have this in the Egyptian tarot. Okay,
but only within duality, like the two choices, like
there's duality,
one way or the other, or good or evil, and the representations.
I mean, for symbolism, like the checkered square in the Masonic temples is the white and the black. You cannot separate good from evil. That's what it signifies, right? Okay, but in Egyptian tarot, there's the tarot card number 6. Okay, you see kind of like a cat, and you see a fellow in the middle, and he's flanked by 2 women. Okay, and there's one that's kind of like a naked woman. The other woman is dressed, right? So one of them is representing his conscience, and the other one is representing his human passions or desires, right? So on his right, the woman offers him intelligence, knowledge, wisdom, through work and contemplation. While on his left side, he has one that's practically nude, almost nude, okay, offers him an easy path to pleasure, okay? So choosing the latter, the easy path to pleasure, will prove much easier than the former, but it's an illusory trap, right? For he will forego his opportunity to control his willpower and cultivate his conscience. Okay, it's like the easy way out kind of thing, right? 7 is a very important number if you look in Christianity. In Genesis, the first book of the Bible references God's creations and the creation process, right? In Genesis 2, chapters 1-3, it says, I'll just read this here. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the 7th day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the 7th day, made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of the creation he had done. So by only including 6 colors, whether it's the pride flag or the original Apple logo, they're like discarding that. Okay, so it's a mockery of God. It's a direct mockery of God. Okay, and Egyptian mysticism and numerology, 7 represents success through commitment, wisdom, and discernment. Okay, so put simply, the divine spirit, something called the breath of life, is what provides the vitality of life, right? Whether in human beings or any other species, is also what we call the mind, as opposed to matter. Okay, there's mind and matter. You can read Edgar Allan Poe. He covers this brilliantly in many of his works. I think The Pit and the Pendulum, you should read that. He talks about mind and matter, and that mind came before matter. So like us, we have a body, we have cells and all that. That's matter, right? But it's the mind that controls, it's our spirit that like brings everything to life, right? It's the breath of life, what people would call, so that these are removed. Okay, so same thing in the pride flag. The other thing that's quite significant, believe it or not, and this you can look it up online. The first Apple computer, you know how much it sold for?
No,
$666.66. I'm not freaking making this up.
they just can't stop themselves,
I
though, can
mean,
they?
like, okay, Steve Wozniak and there's Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs is actually pretty. Sorry, like, pardon my French, but he was a nitwit. Okay, he was just a facade for the company. Okay,
Most definitely.
who played Steve Jobs in the movie, the Hollywood movie?
I can't quite remember who did play Steve Jobs in the Hollywood movie. Oh, was it? Gosh,
Ashton
no,
Kutcher.
no, not Mr. CIA himself. I didn't watch it. Obviously, I didn't
Ashton
watch it.
Kutcher. He's a very
Oh,
flamboyant Freemason. You can see him with Freemason
yeah,
cap and everything.
he
This is
loves it.
not a coincidence. Okay, so he's a
Mm.
Freemason. I don't want to get into this one. It's too long unless you want to. But in that podcast, I talk about well, you must know about this because you covered Jeffrey Epstein a lot. You know
Ooh,
that
here we
Bill
go.
Clinton painting they found in Jeffrey Epstein's New York mansion with
Yeah,
the
go
blue
on, go
dress and
on.
all that, right?
Tell me more. Yeah, I do
Oh,
know.
you want to know more about that?
I want to know more about that right now. I want to know everything.
Okay. In French, we say attache ta tuque, which means tie your toque with your winter hat because it's going to be a rough ride.
D'accord, d'accord.
So I covered
Please,
this
please.
in the Big Pop podcast, but like now we can tie in Obama in this too if you want. But anyway, they found that painting in the late summer of 2019 in Jeffrey Epstein's New York City mansion. Okay, now this was a painting. For your listeners, if they can type it up in Google while they listen to it, but basically it was Bill Clinton sitting on a chair in the Oval Office. It's like
He's sitting
sitting
to his
sideways on
side,
a
isn't he? Yeah,
chair,
sideways on a chair.
side with his leg crossed, and he has
And
his blue dress, and he has these red shoes.
he's
Okay.
like this. He's something like this, which is like hands over the top or something.
Oh gosh, and there's so much symbology in there, it's crazy. Okay, so I'll try to make it. Oh, and he's a
It's
very
hard to
important.
look at it. It's hard to
He's
look at it. For me, I have to say it's hard to look at it. Go
Okay,
on.
he's pointing at the viewer too. Okay, he's pointing
Mm-hmm.
at the viewer, right at the viewer. Okay, Bill Clinton. And behind there's a bookshelf, and you can't really make out the books, but there's one book you can make out too. Okay,
No.
so now most people think that the blue dress has to do with Monica Lewinsky because he had an affair with her and all that. But that's not right. Okay, it's the dress that his wife wore at the 2009 Kennedy Center honors. Okay, it's the same blue dress if you look at the painting.
Mm.
Okay, the red shoes he's wearing. Okay, there's different interpretations. Red here, the red shoes, they can be symbolic interpretations for many different things. One is feminism, the other is pedophilia, and the other is Satanism.
Mm-hmm.
And an alternate explanation for the red shoes is also could be in association with the shoes that were worn by Dorothy in the 1939 movie The Wizard of Oz, right? Because actually in the novel, she was adorned with silver colored shoes, which represented silver as real money, just like the Yellow Brick Road was gold, the gold standard, right? Like people can look into that, right? So that's some symbolism there. Now, I'll come back to Bill Clinton, but in the back, you can only see one book, okay? And if you zoom it in like 300%, you'll see it's a portrait of John F. Kennedy. Okay, and it's actually mirrored because these people are very twisted. They always mirror things to pervert things because they're all about perversion. Okay, so they mirror the image. If you mirror the image, and there's only one book that was written about JFK, it's called Not in Your Lifetime. It's the definitive book on the JFK assassination. Okay, so anyway, and there's also Clinton, I mentioned, pointing at the viewer. So at least according to an ex-CIA agent, Kevin Shipp, he was kind of a whistleblower. When I blogged, I used to write about, I did a 3-part series post he did a long PowerPoint presentation and the oral presentation about the CIA and, all the FBI and basically the deep state. Okay. And he was, I think he was a counterintelligence officer, so he knew a lot about all these people. And he thinks that this particular painting with the book of JFK in back and Clinton pointing at the viewer was actually a veiled threat directed at Donald Trump. In other words, you better get in line and follow the program, otherwise, you're next. And we can talk about, Trump running again and will they assassinate him? It wouldn't surprise me.
Why would they choose that collection of things to threaten?
He's not part of the club because there's reason to believe he's also a Freemason because he does the pen symbols all the time. One of them is the devil symbols. They have their own symbols.
Oh, but that's been forged into society. It's hard to get. I mean, sometimes it's like I know. I was in a rock band, man. I was lead singer and stuff, and even when I was doing it, I was trying not to do that. But it was everywhere. It's everywhere. Of course, it's everywhere. It's kind of like it's one of those things that is within. But I do believe that he is part of the club. That there's actually a few clubs. Next year, I'll be able to explain this in more detail because I'll have a transatlantic group of articles that will go back into a society and will show people that nearly everybody they love is involved. It's terrible. It's actually it's going to be one of the worst series that you can imagine because it just shows everybody's in on it. Everybody's in on it.
The Freemasons is crazy. I mean, I could ruin people's childhoods just talking about who's in on the these satanic agendas. But anyway, I mean, Trump. A lot can be said. Like is he in? Is he not? Or like, but that's a discussion for another day. I'll leave it at that for Trump. But JFK was a Freemason too.
Was he? But they let people into. I mean, I remember like a few years after, and just before he got assassinated, Bobby Kennedy was standing up at Bohemian Grove giving a speech. So they seem to all revolve in the same circles, and some of them play the fool, and some of them play the hero.
But I think he won it out because I think it was a month or so. I can't remember the exact date. It was in 1961. I think he did a speech at a university about secret societies. So basically denouncing, all this. I don't know if you know about this particular speech. You can look it up, or your audience members can look it up. It's worth listening to. And just a month or two later, he was assassinated. He also tried to bring back the silver certificate notes also in the U.S. I forget the exact executive order, but there were $5 bill silver certificates that had a red band instead. So those got rid of. I think Johnson got rid of those right after him. So there's reason to believe that he was a Freemason, but he kind of wanted to oust these people because he knew what they wanted. But anyway. So, but what's interesting too about this Epstein painting is you might not know, or most people won't notice, is his hand that he's pointing at the viewer. You look at it carefully. He has 6 fingers. Do you know about the finger symbology?
No, I don't. Okay. Go on, tell me.
Well, we talked about the number 6 before. It's not necessarily like that. There's always 6 and 666. But anyway. So the 6 fingers, it basically signifies that he's of a special bloodline, or at least he thinks he is. Okay. So this goes way back. You can go back all the way to some scriptures in the Bible, in the book of Enoch. Okay, where there was a race of giants known as the Nephilim. Okay, so they were spun from the interbreeding of human females with who? With fallen angels or other beings not from this planet. Okay. So And these supposedly are the people who have like ruled for centuries, okay, in the last couple millennia. Okay, there's a lot of work you can read online, like there's some good references on the Nephilim, jw.org, Violent Nephilim. There's Matrix Disclosure. You can Nephilim, World of Giants, Forbidden History, Ancient Giants, Gods and Kings. You can read about this. Another guest that's often on the SGT report is Dustin Nemos. Okay, he has a work I think called The Children of Satan. You can read about that, and he also has a great information on the Nephilim.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also there's another. Go ahead.
Go I was going to say because a lot of that. I mean, for people listening, a lot of them are going to say you have to be religious to believe this. You have to be like to go that distance. I would say in the reason why I was brought up as a Christian, but it easily lost my faith at about 11. Was snuck into a Christian school by having to pretend. I annoyed Father Simon so much that he lied to my school and told them I was confirmed, and so they let me in. The priest hated me so much he was willing to face eternal damnation. But then I've come round in big full circle, and now I'm in a situation where the majority of people that I speak to who are Christian have about the best idea of what's about to happen. And I'm like, well, it's if you get to the same end game, it looks like the same deal. So I have especially over the past few weeks, I have prayed more than I have ever in my life. So I am aware that I think I've been on my own spiritual journey that leads me to not want to call the bigger thing a certain name. But I understand that I've got to do something for it, and it's got to be good, because if I do bad, then I will get bad back. So that's all I know, and that is completely in line with most Christians. And now we've come up to the point where the world looks like it's going into Armageddon, and it's like human created Armageddon, and it looks organized. You realize that, right? Okay, I don't have to necessarily be religious to be down with realizing I need to be on the right side when fighting against people who believe on the other side that they are all powerful, they deserve control, and they look, act, and are completely indistinguishable from what Satan and the forces of evil that have been described by many preacher in history. They're indistinguishable. So what we're seeing now is something that is full of just like, it's got revelations written all over it. And it's hard not to go, well, I've got more in common with these guys over here who are sane, calm, and religious than I do with these guys over here who are going nuts and cutting themselves up, who are doing stuff that is just obviously psychologically scarring, and then calling psychological scars like sort of like personality and stuff like this, and trying to do, everything's getting esoteric over there. I understand. I pray to whatever this thing is. It's wonderful, but it's painful too. Whatever this whole roller coaster thing, this karmic wave. I always describe it as like a karmic. You're obviously religious, so how long have you been, like, how strong are you religiously been throughout your life, and has it increased as you've seen this happen?
I mean, okay, that's a great question, actually. First of all, you're kind of hesitating what to call. A lot of people say God, but you don't need to say God. You decide. Okay, it could be creator, it could be whatever, higher power, or whatever. Okay, and people, you can be atheists. Of course that's fine. People can believe that, But there's still a lot of value, and I'm not a Bible thumper, but there's a lot of value in reading the Bible, because it's the prophecies in there are just so incredible. We were talking about the mark of the beast earlier. I mean, I gave a few examples. So even if you're agnostic, you're not religious, you're atheist, you could still learn a lot, okay? And I think there's no denying, even if you're an atheist and agnostic, that there's spiritual warfare going on. There's a lot of evil, okay? Even if you're not religious, people can tell there's a lot of evil going on, okay? And a lot of people who are in these positions of control, well, that's who they worship. They worship Satan. Who is Satan? Satan is the fallen angel, right? Like often we talk about, okay, even Freemasons, okay? He's a 33rd degree Freemason. Well, look at the number again. Numerology, number 33. Where does that number come from? Do you have any idea?
No.
Okay. Well, talk about Lucifer. Lucifer is the angel who disobeyed God, and God banished him, right, to hell. Well, Lucifer, he brought a third of the angels that God had created. 1/3, 1 divided by 3 is 33.33, and so on, right?
Reoccurring, yeah.
That's where they get their number, okay? It's all in your face if you just look at it, okay? I can give you some more examples later, but the 6 fingers thing, look, it was the same thing. Like, talk about who's ruling the world, all the bloodlines and so on. I'm sure you're familiar with the Renaissance painter Raphael. Raphael Sanzio.
Yeah, but I don't know that much. Tell me.
So anyway, you can look it up, and you can type this at the same time if you want. He made a painting of the Sistine Madonna, which is Jesus' mother with baby Jesus. There's another lady in the portrait, but there's a fellow on the left. He's the Pope Sixtus the Fourth. Okay, and this one's very clear, much clearer than the Bill Clinton painting. He has 6 fingers. Now, he was painted by Raphael, okay? Raphael and Michelangelo, they were the top 2 painters during the Renaissance period for the, painting for the popes and the court, and the church, not the court, the Catholic Church, right? Like, he knows anatomy. They both know anatomy extremely well. He would not paint the freaking Pope with 6 fingers, okay?
Yeah, that's
unless
purpose.
he was told to do so, okay? So this is symbology hidden. You can look into that. Now, where it gets really interesting too is you can look at Obama's official portrait, painting portrait, not his like one on Wikipedia where you see his presidential photographic portrait. I'm talking about like the portrait. You can type it up in Google. He's sitting on a brown wood chair, and the background is a whole bunch of leaves. And I didn't really analyze the background, but some people say there's there's allusions to Adam and Eve and the forbidden fruit and all that. But that's not what interests me the most about his painting. He has his arms crossed, and that's another Masonic symbol, but anyway, for another day. But his left hand, which appears on the left hand side of the painting, he also has 6 fingers. Okay, and some people might say, well, and this one's less obvious. Okay, it looks like just an extra little pinky. Okay, but if you look at who he personally chose as an artist, it's a black fellow named Kehinde Wiley who painted this official portrait. He's a very like out in your face, like occultist Freemason. Okay, yeah, you could see he's always doing the hand gestures for different kinds of. But he did another painting piece where you have there's a 2014 stained glass kind of series installed in I think it's in the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. Okay, you can type this up, and you'll see these 3 kind of church-like like the stained glass, like very vivid colors, like
Mm-hmm.
portraits. So it's a triptych, right? There's 3 paintings, and I'll describe the 3. Just a few observations, okay? And he's photographed in front of it. First of all, he has his hand gesture is basically the Masonic triangle that he's showing. And then the 3 panels, they're just a satanic mockery of the Holy Trinity. Okay. We have this number 3 again, because the Holy Trinity is, God the Father, Jesus the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Okay, so that's how that's another way they mock Jesus, right? So the leftmost stained glass portrait you see, okay, the subject's like a man holding a staff, just like Moses had, right? It's a symbol of power and secret or divine knowledge, okay? And it's tipped with a pine cone tip, okay, similar to those seen in depictions of Dionysus, or Bacchus is the Roman name. Which signifies the attainment of higher levels of consciousness or access to higher realms, the third eye, okay? And also on that particular one is you see a scroll. A scroll is a symbol of adherence to the secret philosophy. So
you said scroll and not squirrel, then, didn't you?
A scroll.
I heard squirrel, and I was just like, I automatically, like, I was setting scenes in my head as you're talking, and I was like, okay, that doesn't make any sense.
You roll up a scroll, right?
Sorry, go on.
That's okay. Yeah. The second stained glass has a figure, which is an obvious description of a man that looks like Vladimir Lenin. Okay. So this is, like, don't need to lecture you on what happened during the Russian Revolution. Okay. It was a big ploy by, the banking elite to get in there and destroy Christianity, because Christianity was already starting to spread a lot there, and they wanted to destroy it. Okay. So the Russian Revolution is all about, destroying Christianity and introducing Lenin's communist takeover of the powers in the great Russian Empire. Okay. So that particular middle glass stained kind of window image symbolizes communism. Okay, so implicitly projecting that is what to come in the United States of America. And we could talk about Washington, D.C. later, how that was all set up in the dollar bill and everything, anyway, we can talk about that later. There's also halos for all 3 figures in this particular kind of 3-set image. So it's a clear blasphemous attack on Jesus Christ and Christianity. And if you look at the other paintings of this particular artist, he has paintings of women holding severed heads. Okay, that's also kind of Masonic.
Second time that I thought of Caravaggio when you've been speaking, because early on when you were talking about figures with 6 fingers, I had this feeling: did Caravaggio ever paint anybody with 6 fingers? I got a feeling that he did, and he did severed heads as well. Famous severed heads. Was it the severed head of John or Peter or somebody? It
might have been David Goliath, and there might be other ones in there. He did at least one that's quite famous. They always had these very black backgrounds.
An amazingly interesting guy. I mean, not nice, but amazingly
he was an outcast too.
Yeah.
He was a special outcast during that period. But anyway, it goes to kind of say, like, this is the guy Obama chose, because he has, this public persona of being, this, soft-spoken, level-headed guy. But you can see in so many different portraits his Masonic gestures, whether it's the devil. I know the devil could just be rock and roll kind of thing, but there's all these other, he's on the cover of Ebony magazine in the last letter Y is covered by his head, and he has like two devil horns. It's like the symbology is everywhere, and you can see him in so many different.
Crouching Obama, hidden Satanist. No, well, not Satanist, CFR member, all same thing. He's someone who said he wasn't in the CFR at all, and you could tell he's a hidden CFR member. He's out in the back, he's one who's been, let's like distance ourselves from him and make him leader. Definitely down with the club. It was really sad as well because, oh man, I fell for that. I was a sucker. Hope and change. You give me hope and change. And back then I would believe it too. And I did believe it. And I was sure. I remember going into work after the election and someone was saying to me that it was a crock of shit. And me being like, no, but it was like a week before I was like, it's exactly the same, is it? Fuck. Man, I was hoping change was good though. It was good. They give you hope for change and nothing's going to change because it's the same people in charge. Just the same people in charge. Same guys running the shop. Listen, we're going to have to wind this down now. We've been on for a couple of hours. This is amazing because every time you're talking, I'm not only thinking about what we're speaking about, but I'm like thinking about a load of other things that are interconnected that I've researched here, or I've researched there, and I get a feeling that one day we're going to have to collaborate on something. I know that off screen over the next year or so, I would like to pick your brains about the series I'm eventually going to be releasing next year, because I think you'll enjoy it very much, and I don't think anybody is expecting it. And I'm working with an extremely good researcher who doesn't see himself as an extremely good researcher. He just sees himself as a normal everyday person, so yes, I definitely think I'd love to pick your brains about that. So we said earlier on that your stuff's available at fournier.substack.com. So is that the best place for people to find you / about if they want to get to your link tree or something like that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I do kind of have a link tree. I think I can't remember it's from there, my Substack.
For people who can hear the audio and don't see the picture, I think your kids just come in the room and
that's why I don't want to show them.
I know. Well, he's coming at the right time. He's come at the right. Listen, Dan, thank you for your time. It's been really brilliant to speak with you. I've loved your work. I hope there's more to come. Is there anything you want to say before we go?
I mean, just prepare. People should have a look at my one of my latest articles. It's not the last one up there on my Substack, but cyber attack crisis. I really think that's what's coming next, and people need to get prepared. And at the bottom of that article, I have some tips on how people can prepare too, and things they should consider. So maybe have a look at that. Don't forget, symbols are all around us. Use your observation skills, like what's going on, what can you see when you watch people on TV, learn more about Freemasonry, because we're being controlled by a lot of these people who are Freemasons, and they worship Satan, Lucifer, and they think that evil is good and everything is perverted. So people need to look into this, because these are the people who are ruling over us. They want more power, control. They want complete control over us. And if we give them a digital ID and CBDC, it's going to be really ugly. So people need to spread the word and do not comply, do not submit to this stuff.
Yes.
So that would be my final message.
It's a good one.